Right, so here's a thought I've been sitting with for a while, and I think it's the reason I wanted to make this video in the first place. American Dad is a show that people put on when they've already decided to stop paying attention. That's not an insult. That's basically its job now. It's the thing that goes on the telly at 11:30 at night while you do the washing up, or fold something, or scroll on your phone, or lie there with the lights off and let it run. It's wallpaper. Very good wallpaper, but wallpaper all the same. And the numbers back that up in a way I find sort of lovely. It was the second most binged series on Hulu, according to a Nielsen report in 2024. Disney announced in December of 2025 that it had passed 1 billion hours streamed on Disney Plus over the course of that year. 1 billion, which isn't a show people are watching. It's a show people are living near. It's furniture at this point. But the thing is, I've been rewatching it properly, actually watching it, sitting up, paying attention, like it's a real program. And what I found underneath all the wallpaper is a cartoon that has quietly been one of the most emotionally honest things on television for 2 decades. And I don't think it ever meant to be. I don't think anyone planned this. I think a group of writers set out to make jokes about the Bush administration, got bored of that fairly quickly, and then spent the rest of its life accidentally making a show about loneliness and masks and what people do with pain they never dealt with. So that's what tonight is. We're going to wander through it. The lore, the daft bits, the production history, the alien in the attic, and all 400 of his fake identities. The fish who used to be an Olympian, the man who thought his dad was a spy. And along the way, we'll pull out the bits that I think are actually worth something, because there are more of them than you'd expect. There's no order to this, not really. Each bit stands on its own. If you drift off somewhere around the middle, you haven't missed a thing, because there isn't a big finish waiting at the end. It isn't built for that. If you fancy sticking around for more of these, subscribing does help me out quite a lot. And it's free, and that's the last I'll say about it. Right, let's start with the fact that this show was never supposed to exist. So the origin story here starts, of all places, with the 2000 American presidential election. Seth MacFarlane has been fairly open about it. His version is that he and Matt Weitzman were so frustrated with the Bush administration that they'd just spend days complaining and moaning about it, and eventually figured they should channel that into something creative and hopefully profitable, which is a wonderfully honest way to describe the birth of a television program. Not, we had a vision, not, we wanted to say something, just, we were annoyed, and annoyance is free, so let's monetize it. Mike Barker tells it slightly differently, and I like his version even more. Speaking in early 2005, he said that about 1.5 years earlier, Seth had rung him and asked if he and Matt would be interested in working on a show about a right-wing CIA agent and his liberal daughter. And Barker said it was right up their alley, and everything just fell into place. That's the pitch. That's the whole thing. A right-wing dad and a left-wing daughter in a house, shouting. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it is. The show's bones were taken more or less directly from All in the Family. Stan is Archie Bunker with a bigger chin. Haley is Gloria. Jeff, when he turns up, is Michael Stivic, the hippie boyfriend who becomes the husband and lives in the father-in-law's house, while the father-in-law can't stand him. Same architecture, cartoon paint. MacFarlane has said outright that he wanted to recreate that dynamic of a conservative father and a liberal daughter. So this isn't fan theory, it's the stated design. Fox ordered a pilot presentation in September of 2003. Variety reported it at the time, and the report noted that if it got greenlit, American Dad could launch as early as autumn 2004. Fox were building out a whole new lineup of adult animated sitcoms, and this was part of the plan. Now here's the bit that I think reframes the entire show, and I don't think enough people know it. American Dad was originally intended to be Fox's answer to all the fans who'd been left behind when Family Guy was cancelled. Read that again because it's mad. Family Guy had died. It had been cancelled, properly cancelled, and there was this enormous frustrated audience out there with nowhere to put their attention. And Fox looked at that audience and thought, right, we'll give them something similar. Here's another Seth MacFarlane cartoon. Same style, roughly the same speed. Will that do? American Dad was a replacement, a stand-in, the understudy, and then 3 months after it debuted, Family Guy was revived. I find that properly funny, in a bleak sort of way. The show came into being specifically to fill a hole, and then the thing that made the hole came back, and now American Dad was just sort of standing there. Suddenly it had this enormous expectation on it. Could it actually distinguish itself from the show it was built to imitate and succeed on its own merits? Now that the original was back in the building, the critics had already made their minds up, and I mean already, before it aired. The Washington Post ran a piece the day before the Super Bowl preview, and they called the show disappointing. In advance, they hadn't seen the series. They'd seen a sneak preview slot on a schedule, and they'd decided. The line was that the look and the pace of American Dad is the same as Family Guy, and that was that. Verdict in, move along. The San Francisco Chronicle's headline was Fox isn't sly. American Dad is a wannabe. So the show went out on the 6th of February, 2005. Later that night, after Super Bowl, it pulled 15.1 million viewers on the back of the biggest lead-in on American television, And then it went away until the 1st of May, because the rest of the first season didn't launch until Fox's animation domination block started, which meant its first proper episode aired after the season premiere of the revived Family Guy. It literally had to walk on stage behind the show it was supposed to replace. And here's the last piece, which I think is the saddest and also the most useful. MacFarlane wasn't paying attention to it. This is documented. In the early seasons, he was described as focusing almost entirely on Family Guy, to the point where American Dad was completely sec. The phrase used was that he was just going along for the ride, and Mike Barker and Matt Weitzman weren't much better off. They were also trying to work out what the show even was and where it was going, what the show even was and where it was going. So picture that. You've got a program that exists as a substitute for an audience that's gone back to the original, made by people who aren't sure what they're making, with a creator who's admitted he doesn't really get it, being reviewed by critics who wrote it off before broadcast. Nothing about that should work. And then something happened that I don't think anyone can fully account for. It just got weirder. Season by season, it developed its own approach, its own identity, and it kept drifting further from everything else on the air until it had been described as the weirdest show in network prime time. Not the funniest, not the cleverest, the weirdest, serving up. And this is the phrase that stuck, distinguishing blasts of surrealism. And MacFarlane came round. He worked out that Barker and Weitzman were onto something that was actually different from Family Guy, and that audiences liked it. He became, by his own account, a huge fan of his own show. He fell in love with Roger, and by the early 2010s he was pouring more time into it than he ever had before. The creator of the show became a fan of the show. That's such a strange sentence, and yet it's exactly what happened. Barker had a line about why the humour works, and he said American Dad isn't as reference-laden as Family Guy or South Park, and that its humour comes more from the human condition and emotions that everyone can relate to, Tego, and so on. As Seth MacFarlane put it, it's that everyone can relate to, ego, and so on. And for that reason, he reckoned their humour was a little more evergreen. He was right. He was so right that I don't think he knew how right he was, because a show built on Bush-era political satire should have been unwatchable by about 2011. Instead, it's the thing you fall asleep to in 2026, because it stopped being about politics almost immediately and started being about people who can't say what they mean. And the lesson in that, if you want one, isn't believe in yourself. It's actually the opposite, and I think it's more comforting. Nobody believed in this. Not the network, not the critics, not the audience. And for a good while, not even the man whose name was on it. It got made anyway, by people doing a job, and it turned into something worth caring about somewhere around the point where everyone stopped watching it closely enough to interfere. Some things need to be ignored for a while before they can become themselves. That's not a motivational poster. That's just what happened here. I should say, for what it's worth, I was one of the people who dismissed it for years. I had it filed under the other one. I was wrong, and I've been correcting that at a rate of about 3 episodes a night, which is why we're here. But now, let's talk a little about where all this actually happens, because I think the setting of this show gets almost no credit, and it's quietly one of the strangest places in television. Picture the front of the house. You've seen it 1,000 times. 2 stories, a bit of lawn, a driveway, absolutely nothing remarkable about it. It sits on Cherry Street in Langley Falls, Virginia, and the name is doing some work there. Langley Falls is a made-up town, but it takes its name from the actual Langley in Virginia, which is where the CIA lives. It's also based on Great Falls, which is the well-off commuter town nearby. So the whole setting is a mashup of the spy agency and the suburb, which is the entire show in 2 words if you think about it. It's not subtle, and I don't think it's trying to be. Now, the house. From the outside, it's a normal family home. 2 floors, a basement, an attic. But across the run, this house has revealed that it contains an absolutely absurd number of secret rooms, facilities and habitats. And the joke, the actual joke, the one they've been running since more or less the beginning, is that each one turns up exactly once, and is then never mentioned again. There's one in Of Ice and Men. There's a whole thing in Bush Comes to Dinner. In The Missing Kink, the house is shown to have a previously unseen underworld, where various friends and acquaintances of the Smiths go to party and frolic, which raises so many questions and answers none of them. And in the episode with the greatest title in the show's history, the full cognitive redaction of Avery Bullock by the coward Stan Smith. It turns out Stan has a secret control room hidden underground right next to the house. The door is camouflaged with the surrounding grass. You get in via a handprint reader that rises out of the ground when he extends his arm at it. It's full of state-of-the-art equipment, and then it's never seen again. Nobody brings it up. It's just there, presumably, under the lawn, forever. I love that. I love that so much. Because the implication, if you follow it, is that the Smith house is essentially bottomless. It contains whatever the episode needs it to contain, and once the episode is over, that thing keeps existing, and nobody visits it. There's a party underworld under that house right now, with nobody in it. Greg Corbin and Terry Bates, a gay couple who are the local news anchors for WANG TV, and who are occasionally portrayed as running a neater, tidier home than the Smiths do. A neater, tidier home than the Smiths do. Which is a small thing, but it's the kind of small thing this show is good at. The joke isn't that they're a couple, the joke is that the Smiths' house is a tip, and the neighbours have their act together. Steve goes to Pearl Bailey High School, presided over by Principal Brian Lewis, who is described in the official terms as incredibly unprofessional and hedonistic, and that is putting it kindly. Stan's boss at the agency is Avery Bullock, who is the deputy director of the CIA, and who over the years has become one of the most reliably unhinged characters on the programme. Now here's a fun detail that I think about constantly, and it changes how you watch every single scene of this show. The voice cast don't record together. They never have. Each of them performs their lines privately, on their own, in a booth. And the reason given is beautiful. They've said that because of their personalities and their tendency to goof off when they're all together, they'd never get anything finished if they recorded as a group. So every conversation in this show, every argument at the dinner table, every Stan and Roger row, every tender moment between Francine and one of the kids, was assembled out of people who were completely alone in a room. Wendy Charles doing Francine's half of a fight with nobody there. Scott Grimes doing Steve's side of a conversation into the air. And then someone in an edit suite slots them together, and it sounds like a family. There's something quite nice about that, and I'm not going to push it any further than that. It's just a nice fact. Since we're on the subject of how it gets made, the music, this is the thing that makes American Dad sound different from almost everything else, and almost nobody clocks it. They use a full orchestra every episode. Walter Murphy wrote the theme, Good Morning USA, which MacFarlane sings, and the opening of it nicks the introduction to Stars and Stripes Forever, which is a very funny thing to do. Murphy scores the show alongside Joel McNeely and Ron Jones over the years. MacFarlane's description of the workload is my favourite thing he said about animation. He said that doing a traditional sitcom, process-wise, feels like a breeze compared to doing an animated show. That with animation, you can get a live-action sitcom done in a couple of months, as opposed to a year. That doing an animated show is like putting together a little movie every week. Everything's storyboarded with the intricacy of a feature film action sequence, editing with a musical score in mind, an orchestra for each episode. He said he was just shocked at how much work it was. He said working on animated shows like American Dad is a breath of fresh air because you don't have to worry about sets, UT sets, and animation gives you more freedom. Two men, same show, completely contradictory, takes on whether the job is hard. I don't know which of them is right, and I suspect they're both right about their own job and wrong about each other's, which is true of basically every workplace I've ever been in. Right. And then there's the golden turd. I have to explain this because if you've not seen the show, it sounds like I'm making it up. In an early episode called Homeland Insecurity, the show is going along normally, following the main characters, and then it just stops following them. The camera wanders off. And instead of the plot, we're suddenly deep in the lives of complete strangers, people we've never met and will never meet again, who have come into possession of Roger's gem-encrusted golden feces. Because Roger, being an alien, produces solid gold droppings encrusted with gems, obviously, and these strangers' lives are ruined and reshaped by this object. And then the episode goes back to the actual story, and here's the thing, it doesn't stop there. The golden turd keeps coming back, for years, across the whole run. It turns up in Rapture's Delight as the power source for Roger's spaceship, which, we'll get to that one. It becomes the show's longest running joke, and it eventually gets a proper conclusion in the 300th episode, and by that point people had been following the adventures of this thing for well over a decade. That's the technique, by the way. It's got a name. It's a non sequitur crossed with a story within a story, and American Dad does it more than almost any other show. The focus just wanders off into the lives of people who have nothing to do with anything. The missing kink does it with a drug-abusing bird, and Francine's inexplicable ability to understand and communicate with the bird's chirping, which is dropped in and never addressed. That's the house. That's the town. That's the machinery. I don't have a lesson for you here. I want to be upfront about that. Sometimes a thing is just pleasant to know and doesn't need to teach you anything, and I'd rather sit in that for a bit than pretend a secret grass-covered control room is a metaphor for something. It's just a very odd house in a very odd town, made by people who are never in the same room, scored by an orchestra containing a gold turd with its own storyline. Right, let's go and meet the man who lives there. I want to start with Stan, not by telling you who he is, but by just listing some things he's done, because the list does the work. In an episode called Dope and Faith, Stan finds out that one of his mates is an atheist, and Stan decides this needs correcting. So to get this man to pray, Stan blows up his house. Then he spreads bird flu at the man's restaurant. Then he brainwashes the man's wife into thinking she's a lesbian. Then he takes his children away. To make him pray, In I Can't Stand You, Stan overhears some of his neighbours gossiping about him behind his back, so he evicts the entire neighbourhood. Not just the gossips, everyone, including at one point his own family. In 4 little words, Francine is right about something, and Stan is wrong, and Stan realises she's about to say, "I told you so," so he frames her for murder. To avoid hearing 4 words. That's the title. That's what the title means. And then there's the goo. In the vacation goo, Francine's frustrated that she can't get the family together for a Sunday night dinner. Stan suggests a holiday. They go to Maui and they have a wonderful time as a family. And then Roger shuts down the machine they're all plugged into. They were never in Maui. Stan has been programming a fake holiday every single year and putting his family in tanks. Years of memories. Years of photographs in their heads. None of it happened. Francine demands a real holiday, and they go skiing, and then they go to Italy, and both of those turn out to be the goo as well, except this time Steve programmed one and Haley programmed the other. Which is its own little tragedy, isn't it? He taught them the trick. So the obvious raid on Stan is that he's an idiot. And he does do idiot things. He believes popcorn doesn't pop above sea level. He's drunk Roger's urine because Roger told him it was a fancy beer. He once smoked crack believing it was cold medicine, and Roger just watched and pointed it out casually. But I don't think idiot is right. I think idiot lets him off. The actual mechanism and the show's own framing bears this out, is that Stan's intentions are generally good, and he's just far too irrational to ever acknowledge that or learn a single thing from it. He's not stupid, he's certain. Those are different conditions, and the second one is much harder to treat. Because look at what all those examples have in common. Every one of them is a man who has reached a conclusion and would rather demolish reality than revise it. The atheist must pray, therefore the house comes down. Francine must not be right, therefore she's a murderer now. There is no version of Stan Smith that goes, "Hang on, let me think about that." The gap between having a thought and acting on it is measured in milliseconds, and there's nothing in the gap. And the armour on top of the certainty is the masculinity, which the show has always played as a joke, and which is, if you sit with it, quite sad. He bears out his chest, he stands rigidly straight, he's got that deep, thick voice, and he's explicitly opposed to showing emotion, which he associates with being a woman. He once told Steve, and this is a real line, "Son, feelings are what women have. They come from their ovaries." That's a man who has been told something about himself and never questioned it. And yet, the emotions leak. They always leak. There's a lovely exchange where Haley says to him, "Dad, I've never seen this side of you, it's so sweet." And Stan plays along and says, "Well, if you tell anybody, I'll kill you." They both laugh. And then he goes completely serious and says, he means it. He will kill her. He will reach into her chest and pull out her beating heart and eat it. All of it. Every last bit. And then, and this is the punchline that isn't the punchline, he says, "Well, sweet dreams, angel." He cannot be warm without immediately building a wall in front of the warmth. It's compulsive. He said something tender, panicked, and thrown a threat over it like a tarpaulin. Now the show changed him, and I think this is worth talking about because it's a rare thing for a long-running cartoon to actually admit. Stan started as a satire of a very specific political moment. He idolised George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. He was bordering on right-wing authoritarianism, and the show wielded his bigotry and paranoia as its main engine. Early on, he opposed homosexuality and gay marriage outright. Then Lincoln Lover happened, and he ended up associated with the log cabin Republicans and changed his view. Then Surrogate, where Francine acts as a surrogate for Greg and Terry, and by the end of that episode, Stan has properly clocked that they're a loving family. Lincoln Lover, incidentally, got a GLAAD Media Award nomination for Outstanding Individual Episode in 2007, which is not a sentence I ever expected to be typing about this show. And as the seasons went on, the political stuff was quietly dropped. Weitzman said as much, that the Stan and Haley dynamic had a limited shelf life, that it didn't give them nearly as much as they'd thought it would, and that the show actually grew and benefited from losing it, because it would have got boring. So Stan's satirical traits stopped being a critique of anything and just became him. Divorced from the politics, he kept the wrong-headedness and the extremism and lost the manifesto, which, weirdly, made him a better character. He went from being an argument to being a bloke, and then there's the one that stops me every time. The kidney stays in the picture. It's revealed that Francine cheated on Stan at her bachelorette party, which means Haley might not be his daughter. There is a DNA test available. It exists. It's right there. And Stan refuses to look at it. Think about who this is. This is a man who evicted a neighbourhood over gossip, who blew up a house over a theological disagreement, who framed his wife for murder to dodge a sentence. There is no measure too extreme for Stan Smith. He has never once in his entire life thought, that's a bit much. And he will not open an envelope. That's the whole character. That's it, right there. The most extreme man alive declines to take the one action that would give him information he doesn't want to have. And I don't think the show is calling him a coward for it. I think it's the most sympathetic thing it's ever done for him, because it's the only time his certainty is aimed at something worth protecting. He has decided Haley is his daughter, and he is not going to let a fact anywhere near that decision, which is, when you turn it over, exactly the same instinct that made him blow up his friend's house. Same engine, same refusal to update, just pointed somewhere kind for once. And here's the bit that reaches out of the telly. Because most of us aren't blowing anything up, but everyone knows a Stan, the person who'd rather do something enormous than something revealing, who'd rather solve it, fix it, escalate it, dominate it, than sit there and go, I don't know actually. The person for whom the phrase, let me think about that, would constitute a kind of injury. Certainty feels like strength. It's the thing we praise in people, decisive, knows his own mind, no messing about. But certainty is just a wall you put up so you never have to be updated by anything. It's not that Stan can't change his mind. It's that changing his mind would mean the old mind was wrong. And if the old mind was wrong, then who's been in charge of his life this whole time? He'd rather have the goo. He'd rather have a holiday that didn't happen than a conversation that might. And the reason he's like that isn't a mystery, by the way. The show tells us. It's not subtle about it either. It's just that the answer is standing in a helicopter over a funeral. And we'll get to him next. So Stan hired a man to play his dad. I want to make sure that lands properly, because it's the sort of detail that goes past you at speed the first time. Stan Smith, grown adult, CIA agent, husband, father of two, was paying an actor to be his father. Not for a bit, not as a gag, as an ongoing arrangement. And the reason is that Stan's actual father left, and Stan needed there to be a father. So he bought one. For most of his life, Stan believed his dad was a top-secret agent in something called the Scarlet Alliance. That's the story he had. That's what he told people. My dad's a spy. That's why he's not here. He's off doing important things for his country, and he can't tell anyone about it, including me. His dad was a jewel thief. That's it. That's the whole of it. Jack Smith was a jewel thief and a con man who walked out on his family and spent somewhere between 20 and 40 years in prison, and the entire mythology of the heroic, absent father was something a small boy built out of nothing to explain why the man wasn't at his birthday. And the thing about that lie is that it's load-bearing. It's the only thing that ever stopped Stan from working out that his dad was simply a bad man. As long as the Scarlet Alliance existed, the absence had a reason. Take the Scarlet Alliance away, and all you've got left is a man who didn't want to be there. We find all this out in an episode called Con Air, and the way Jack turns up is perfect. The family are at the funeral of Grandpa Smith, the paid actor, who has now died, which means Stan is at the funeral of a man he was renting. And mid-funeral, the real Jack drops in. Literally drops in. He jumps out of a helicopter. Roger immediately develops what's described as a boy crush on him. Everyone else is wary because everyone else can see it. Roger, of all people, is charmed, which tells you something about both of them. And then Jack does the thing. He talks Stan into joining him on a mission to stop some terrorist activity. His father, the CIA agent, finally working alongside his spy son, which is the thing Stan has wanted his entire life. Is the thing Stan has wanted his entire life. It's the dream. It's the actual dream handed over. And they arrive at the National Gallery of Art, and Stan realises it's a jewel heist. There's no version of that which isn't cruel. Jack didn't just fail to be Stan's hero. He used Stan's need for a hero as the mechanism of the con. He looked at his son's longing and thought, that's an opening. Jack carries a briefcase with a fake moustache in it, by the way. That's his disguise. A moustache in a case. He's not a criminal mastermind. He's a bloke with a moustache in a case who is very good at reading what people want to believe. Now, Jack's back is where it gets complicated, and I like this episode a lot. Jack comes back, and Steve starts looking up to him, really looking up to him, more than he looks up to Stan. Grandad's exciting, Grandad's got stories, Grandad jumps out of helicopters, and Jack notices. And Jack turns himself into the police. He goes back to prison voluntarily because he clocked that he was becoming the same thing to Steve that he'd been to Stan. And he tells Steve straight that he'd never been a good father to Stan, but that he wanted Stan to be a good father to Steve. That's the most love Jack Smith is capable of. Removing himself. It's not much. It's a con man's version of a good deed, in that it costs him a prison sentence and it fixes nothing, but it's real. And it's the only time in the whole show that he chooses his son over the play. Minstrel Krampus is where he gets his ending, sort of. And this is where the show goes fully off the map, in a way I find delightful. Steve is being a brat, and Jack tells him this story about growing up in Lower Berchtesgaden in southern Bavaria, and how as a boy he captured the legendary Krampus, Santa's mate, who punishes naughty children. Stan, fed up with Steve, lets the Krampus out. The Krampus immediately kidnaps Steve and demands Jack. Stan uses his CIA connections to spring Jack from prison. And Jack, of course, obviously. What else was he going to do? Legs it. Leaving Stan to go and negotiate with Santa Claus, who is by this point an established recurring villain in this programme. Because of course he is. Meanwhile, Steve, who's supposed to be the hostage, works out that the Krampus only punishes children because he loves them. Because he's trying to set them straight. And they bond. And Steve is bonding with him just as Stan and Santa arrive, and Santa shoots the Krampus dead. And Jack, who ran, who always runs, comes back, and takes the bullet meant for Stan. He dies. And as Santa scarpers, Jack's blood and the Krampus's blood mix together on the floor, and Jack becomes the new Krampus. So the deadbeat dad who abandoned his son becomes the immortal spirit whose entire job is to travel the world teaching badly behaved children to be better. Which is, I think, one of the funniest and most pointed pieces of karma this show has ever written. He spent his life failing at fatherhood and got sentenced to eternal fatherhood as a punishment. He later reportedly packs it in due to stress and takes a job driving a bus in Baltimore, which is somehow the most devastating detail of the lot. He couldn't even hack being a Christmas demon. Too much pressure. And then there's Ghost Dad, which I'll keep brief because it's the last of him. He gets shot dead at the top of the episode. His ghost possesses Steve and uses him to rob a museum of sports memorabilia, using his grandson's body to do a heist, which is Jack in one sentence. And it goes wrong, and his spirit ends up trapped in that museum, forever, surrounded by priceless objects he can never touch. The man who spent his whole life stealing things ends up in a room full of things, permanently, unable to steal a single one. I want to mention one more, and then I'll leave him. blood crieth unto heaven. The show stopped being a cartoon for an episode. They did it as a filmed stage play, a proper serious Eugene O'Neill-style family drama about the Smiths and Jack. Sets, curtain, the lot. About this, about the father and the son. They took the most damaged relationship in the show and they gave it to the theatre. That's a mad thing for a Sunday night cartoon to do, and I don't think it gets enough credit for it. Right, so what's this actually about? I said last time that Stan's whole condition is certainty, and that he'd rather demolish reality than revise a conclusion. This is where that came from. I'm not going to go over the mechanism again, you've got it. But here's the specific thing. Stan built a hero out of an absence. He took an empty chair and constructed an entire heroic biography around it. And he defended that biography for decades. And the reason he can never be wrong about anything now, ever, about the smallest thing, is that he was already catastrophically wrong about the biggest thing. He got his own father wrong. Completely. For his whole life. And when that happens to someone young enough, they don't conclude, I should hold my beliefs more loosely. They conclude the opposite. They conclude that the ground moved once and it must never be allowed to move again. And so they nail everything down forever and call it having principles. The cruelest joke in it, and this show doesn't say it out loud, it just does it, is that Stan's father was a con man, and the one thing Stan inherited was the conning. Jack lied to everyone else. Stan lies to himself. Same trade, different mark. He's got a briefcase with a fake moustache in it too. It just looks like a wig and an opinion, and a holiday in a tank. It's Christmas morning and Stan can't find a seat. That's how it starts. The Smiths get to church late. It's standing room only, and Stan is absolutely livid. Not about being late, but about all the people who've turned up. The ones who only come at Christmas, the tourists. He's furious at them for clogging up his church and his car park on the one day when he, a proper Christian, a man who does this every week, deserves to be at the front. So Francine, trying to calm him down, takes him into the janitor's cupboard and has sex with him. And they come out, and the church is empty. Everyone's gone. Their clothes are on the floor where they were sitting. The rapture happened. And it happened while Stan Smith W.S.O. did the vast majority of the congregation. Ailey ascended. So did the whole congregation. Stan, Francine and Roger did not Stan and Francine because of the cupboard. Roger because he was never human in the first place, which he takes reasonably well, all things considered. Now, the bit that ends the marriage. Because Stan doesn't handle this the way you'd want him to. He starts blaming her, and in the middle of it, he lets slip that when he was praying in that church, he was praying for himself, and Francine hears it. And she stays with him, dead her, and Francine hears it and she goes. I want to sit on that for a second, because it's the cleanest character assassination this show has ever committed, and it takes about 4 words. He's been going to church every week for years. He has been devout, punctual, and insufferable about it. And he was doing all of that as a solo application. She was never on the form. She leaves, she goes to a diner, and she meets a bloke. The bloke is Jesus. I want to be clear that this is not a metaphor. She meets the actual second coming of Christ in a diner, and she becomes his girlfriend. And then, and this is the moment that made this episode famous, there's an advert break. Before the break, you're watching a fairly normal daft cartoon. Stan's still faffing about trying to get into heaven. Roger's trying to rebuild his spaceship. It's all quite silly. The adverts run. And when we come back, it's 7 years later. The war between Jesus and the Antichrist has reduced the world to a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and the human race is nearly extinct. 7 years, across one advert break. The AV Club gave it an A that night, which was the highest grade of the night. It beat The Simpsons, it beat Family Guy, it beat The Cleveland Show, and called it one of the best episodes of the series. Emily Vanderwerf specifically praised how it starts grounded and gets more surreal as it goes. And Jason Hughes at TV Squad wrote that he was left with his jaw hanging open because American Dad was always the one that stayed with its characters and avoided trips into fantasy. That was its whole reputation. That was the thing that made it not Family Guy. And then it did this, so the wasteland. The survivors have degenerated into savage bikers, militiamen, and prostitutes. Jesus travels around on a motorbike. He rides into the war-torn city of Denver and goes into a bar, and there's Stan. Stan has lost an eye. One, he's a bitter, scarred CIA agent who's still fiercely fighting for his country, mercenary who stopped fighting for anything. And Jesus tells him Francine's been captured by the Antichrist and asks him to help get her back. And Stan says yes on the condition that Jesus sends him to heaven afterwards. He's still negotiating. 7 years of hell on earth, his wife is in a manger in the UN building, and the man is still working the terms. That is such a precise piece of character writing. He hasn't learned anything. He's just got a knife for a hand now. They find Roger, who spent the entire 7 years trying to repair his spaceship so he can leave the war behind, and they get it powered up using the golden turd which I mentioned earlier, and which has now escalated from background gag about alien droppings to the energy source that ends the apocalypse. They fly to New York. The UN building is the Antichrist's lair, and the Antichrist, voiced by Andy Samberg, is this shrill, camp, incompetent thing styled after the Riddler, who claims to be the exact opposite of Jesus in every way. And he traps them in a glass cube full of dirt, and the cube falls apart. The cube falls apart because the Antichrist is a terrible carpenter, and Jesus was a carpenter, so he's a terrible carpenter. I want to be honest with you, that might be the best joke I've ever heard in a cartoon. It's a proper joke. It's got a premise and a mechanism and a payoff, and it requires you to know one thing about the Bible. Whoever wrote that, it was Chris and Matt McKenna, deserved something. There's also a Hall & Oates bit where John Oates has been raptured and Daryl Hall hasn't, which is a joke I think about at odd hours. Anyway, it goes wrong. Stan throws himself in front of a shot meant for Jesus and takes it. He's mortally wounded, there's a bomb, and the spell that would rapture him is taking too long to work. So he lights a cigar and sits there and waits for the bomb. Francine tries to get him out, and he asks her to leave, because the blast will kill her too. And in that moment, she finds the wedding rings. He's been wearing them, on a necklace, under everything, for 7 years. Through the whole war, through the eye, through the blade, through becoming whatever he became out there, the rings have been against his chest the entire time. He never took them off, and he never mentioned it, and he was never going to. He dies in the blast, and he goes to heaven. And Michelle, who, lovely detail, was his lawyer during his trial in Purgatory in an earlier episode, and has since been promoted to escorting people to their personal heavens, takes him to his own. Every saved soul gets a personal heaven, you see. Bespoke. Whatever your subconscious wants. One door opens and there's a half-naked woman riding a unicorn that defecates pepper jack cheeseburgers. That's someone's. That's someone's actual eternal reward. And Stan opens his door. And it's the beginning of the episode. It's Christmas morning. Francine's just finishing getting ready. He's late for church. The only difference in the entire room is that Klaus is dead and mounted on a plaque on the wall, which is its own separate conversation. That's his heaven. That's it. That's the maximum. Every possible thing, infinite options, anything a subconscious could produce. And Stan Smith's paradise is a slightly annoying Tuesday morning with his wife. Running late. He had it. He had it in the first 90 seconds of the episode, and he was too busy being cross about the parking to notice. And then he spent 7 years and an entire apocalypse and his own life trying to earn something better. And the something better was the thing he already had. I don't think I need to spell out what that's about. You know what that's about. Everyone knows what that's about. The whole point is that Stan couldn't see it while he was standing in it, and neither can we. And the show is decent enough not to be smug about it. A couple of bits and pieces before we move on. The title's a play on Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang. which itself directly inspired Blondie's Rapture. That's a two-step joke in a title, and nobody would have blamed them for not bothering. And there's an ongoing argument among fans about whether any of this is canon. The DVD commentary apparently floats the idea that everything from Stan's death onwards is still part of his personal heaven that we never left, which is a lovely thought. But then Klaus is alive again in later episodes, and Steve and Haley are back on Earth. So most people take it as a sign the whole episode sits outside the timeline. I don't have a strong view. I quite like not knowing. It's the only episode where that ambiguity actually improves the thing. Since we're on the subject of Francine, I want to start with the sex garden, because I think it's the single best piece of characterization in the whole show, and it's played as a throwaway. In an episode called When a Stan Loves a Woman, Francine takes Stan to see her sex garden. It's a garden she maintains in honour of all of her previous sexual encounters. Every single one gets a rose bush, and it stretches as far as there are no guided tours, is the joke. The joke is scale. It goes on forever. There are guided tours. There's a rumoured tribe of natives deep in the garden who have never seen a white man. It's an enormous, well-tended, horizon-spanning monument to a woman's sexual history, and the punchline is meant to be, "Blimey, Francine got about a bit." But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that she maintains it. Somebody's been weeding that. Somebody's been out there with the shears. There are guided tours, which means she's arranged guided tours, which means at some point Francine Smith sat down and organised a visitor experience for the archive of the person she used to be. She didn't get over her past, she filed it. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole woman. Right, let's do the actual history, because it's one of the bleakest backstories on television, and it's delivered entirely as gags. She was born to a wealthy couple from South Carolina, Nicholas and Cassandra Dawson, and they gave her up when she was a baby so that they could be upgraded to first class on a flight. That's the origin. She was traded for legroom. We learn this in Big Trouble in Little Langley, and the show doesn't linger on it, because the show never lingers on it. It's a punchline. But sit with the arithmetic for a second. A baby was weighed against a seat, and the seat won. Then the orphanage, Roman Catholic, and in Office Spaceman we find out she was left-handed, and the nuns beat it out of her. Literally. They'd hit her with a side of beef whenever she used her left hand, and on Fridays they'd use a big fish instead, because of the Catholic thing about Fridays. She was taught that left-handed people were the devil's minions. So by the age of 7 she had been given away by her parents for an upgrade, and had a fundamental physical fact about herself violently corrected by people who told her it made her evil. And then at 7, she was adopted by a Chinese-American couple, Baba and Mama Ling. And this is where it turns a bit, and I like this part. She considers herself Chinese. Not as a joke, she means it. She speaks fluent Chinese. She uses it with her parents specifically, so they can talk about Stan in front of him, without him understanding. She's got a sister through them, Gwen. She got a family in the end. She just had to be handed around for 7 years first. Now the wild years, which the show delights in and drip feeds over, about 15 seasons. She was a prolific groupie in the late 80s. She slept with Adamant. She slept with Billy Gibbons from Zazie Top, Dex's Midnight Runners. She had a reputation as the #1 party girl on her campus. She ran a website called Franny.com, featuring herself in amateur adult photo and video shoots, which made her, and I'm not making this up, a successful entrepreneur while at university. Also, in Family Affair, she casually mentions that she stabbed her college roommate to death. And then she's surprised. She's surprised that nobody in the family knew, like it had come up, like she'd mentioned it at some point and they'd all just forgotten. There's also Mr. Feeney, her algebra teacher, on whom she developed a fanatical crush. His wife found her hiding in his closet and called the police. And Francine, a schoolgirl, cornered, frightened, lied and said they'd been in a relationship. He went to prison. He killed himself there. That's in the pilot. That's in episode 1. They put that in episode 1. And then the meeting. She was hitchhiking, drunk, home from a Duran Duran concert. Stan had just graduated from the CIA Academy, and he pulled over to give her a lift. And while he was driving, and enthusiastically feeling up the semi-conscious Francine, he swerved to avoid a raccoon and hit it anyway, which jolted her awake, and Stan got out of the car and shot the raccoon to end its suffering. And that's what did it. That's the moment. She found the compassion attractive. She was drunk, in a stranger's car, being groped, and she watched him show mercy to an animal and thought, that'll do. And then she did the maths. This is stated outright. She sized Stan up as boring but capable, a stable, protected life, someone who could provide. And she cut the wildlife off. Cold turkey. He never knew about any of it. She just closed the door on the entire person she'd been and married a man she'd correctly identified as dull. She's held liberal beliefs the whole time, by the way. She keeps them to herself and follows his. And then there's the vow renewal, which is my favourite thing about this marriage. At their renewal ceremony, in front of a room full of people, out loud, both of them admitted they'd married each other for selfish reasons. Stan said he married her because she was attractive. Francine said she wanted someone to take care of her, financially. They said that. At the ceremony, to guests. And they're still together now, all these seasons on, which either undermines the entire institution of marriage or vindicates it completely. And I can't work out which. So what's the lesson, if there is one? I think it's this. We talk a lot about reinvention, like it's free, like you just decide to be different, and then you're different, and the old you evaporates. And Francine is the show's argument that it doesn't work like that. Reinvention isn't deletion. It's storage. The old you goes somewhere. It has to go somewhere. Francine is comfortably the most capable person in that house. She's Han. She once made a weapon out of a rubber shoe Roger had to wear than once. She once made a weapon out of a government-issue rubber shoe. She's built businesses. She survived a childhood that would have finished most people. And she chose a life much smaller than she is, deliberately, because the alternative was uncertainty. And she'd already had a full lifetime's worth of that by the age of 7. That's not a failure of nerve. That's a completely rational decision made by someone who'd learned that being interesting had never once. There are no tours. Her. But the sex garden's still out there, fully maintained, with tours. And that's the bit that gets me, because it means she hasn't let go of it. She's just put a fence around it and a nice path through it, and a sign at the entrance. She visits. Of course she visits. She built the guided tour. Everyone's got one of these. It's usually smaller. It's a box in the loft or a playlist or a story you tell at parties in a specific voice that lets everyone know it was a different person doing those things. A former S. Francine's former self is just bigger and better organised. Bigger and better organised, and has an undiscovered tribe living in it. Ricky Spanish, Jeannie Gold, Dr. Penguin, Braff Zacklin, Roy Rogers McFreely, Horse Renoir, Reaganomics Lamborghini, Abigail Lemon Party, Sydney Huffman, Scotch Bingington, Appleby McFridays, Dimitri Crotchlick-Meoff, Krispy Kreme McDonald, Luke Fondelberg, Cuss Mustard, Shalanda Dykes, Lieutenant Wings, Chex Lemanu, Spartacus Vanderhill, Billy Jesusworth, Morris Buttermaker, The Phantom of the Telethon, Captain Francois Dubonnet, Uncle Cappy, Tom Yarbo, Bing Cooper, Madeline Carpal Tunnel, Warren Beanstalk, Emmylou Sugarbean, Ace Cruton. I could keep going, that's the point. I could keep going for another 6 or 7 minutes, and I still wouldn't get through them all, and somewhere in the list is a persona who is canonically a graduate of Howard University. Right. Roger. He crashed at Roswell in 1947. That's the actual Roswell. The show's position is that the Roswell incident was Roger, which is a lovely bit of cheek. But the reason he was on that ship is the part that gets me. He was tricked. He'd been led to believe he was the decider, that the fate of humankind rested in his hands, that he was the important one, the chosen one, the whole thing. He was a crash test dummy. They needed someone in the seat and they told him he was special. And he believed it because he wanted to. And he came all this way and he hit the ground in New Mexico. And that was the beginning of his life on Earth. He actually first arrives on Earth during the Roswell incident. Everything else follows from it. It's not even the first time actually. In Ortron Trail, we find out he'd been to Earth before in the 1800s. He crashed then too. He caused his Aunt Caroline's spaceship to go down, and she died on impact, and he survived and went and lived with a family of pioneer fur trappers, who then all died on the Oregon Trail. So that's twice now that Roger has arrived somewhere, been the cause of a disaster, and watched everyone around him die while he carried on. Before the show even starts, he met the Smiths because he saved Stan's life. Roger was a fugitive from Area 51, and he pulled Stan out of something, and Stan decided that meant he owed him a life debt. So Stan rescued him from the government and let him live in the house, in defiance of the CIA, which is, if you think about it, the single most decent thing Stan Smith has ever done. And it's the premise of the entire program. And here's a production fact that I think is one of the great accidents in television. The original plan was ALF. That was it. That was the concept. Roger was going to be like ALF. Sit in the house all day, don't go outside, make comments about life. A sofa alien, a commentary machine. And in the first couple of episodes, that's exactly what he is. Confined, miserable, and malcontent. Because Stan won't let him leave in case someone sees him. And the writers looked at that and went, no, he's far too much fun to keep in the house. So they let him out. And to get him out, they gave him disguises. And the disguises needed names. And the names needed personalities. And the personalities needed lives. One production decision. One, he's too good for this, let's open the door. And that single choice generated the thing that the entire show now runs on. The creators have said it themselves. The personas mean he's almost a different guest star every week, and it lets MacFarlane show off in a way nothing else on the schedule does. Now, the escalation. Because it didn't stop at disguises. The personas started developing their own Lynn the Horse Whisperer, Roger realises, seconds before he walks into a room to see a horse therapist. That the horse therapist is Brian P. Mahan.lks, into a room to see a horse therapist. That he is the horse therapist. He'd booked an appointment with himself. He'd forgotten. He found out at the door. In another episode, Roger and Haley are both surprised to discover that a character Roger had introduced them to wasn't actually one of his personas. He'd lost track in the other direction. He'd assumed a real person was a fake person. Some of his personas are in prison, some are widely despised, some have full-fledged human families, some are married, several have birth children, actual children, that exist, that are costume-fathered, and at least one of them self-identifies as a serial killer. He's got at least one persona wanted for a series of prostitute murders, and he's fooling everyone with a he disguises the grey skin. Joke that everyone forgets is a joke. He does not disguise the grey skin. He does not disguise the non-human face. He puts on a hat and a shirt, and the entire population of Langley Falls simply accepts it, including Stan's colleagues at the CIA, who, according to Roger, have an entire floor of people looking for him. He's been to hospital several times. Medical staff have questioned his strange anatomy, and then carried on. The only people who ever see through it are the Smiths. And even then there's a rule. For each member of the family, there is exactly one persona they cannot recognise as Roger. That's such a strange and specific bit of law, and I love it. Everyone in that house has a blind spot shaped like a person. Now here's the fact. This is the one. If you remember one thing from tonight, I'd like it to be this one. There's an episode where Roger becomes ill and can't attend, and Roger collapses. Action. The characters don't get performed, and Langley Falls collapses, not metaphorically. The town rapidly descends into widespread chaos and violence. It turns out the personas are an integral part of the social cohesion of the entire town. They're load-bearing. The place doesn't work without them. An entire community's functioning depends on the costume habit of one lonely alien in a loft, and nobody in that community has any idea. Persona Assistant, the 250th episode, makes this literal. Roger gets a tumour and has to hand the personas over to Stan, and Stan doesn't take them seriously, and the city descends into utter chaos. There's a rollerblade cobbler who can't get the money for his wife's surgery because Stan didn't show up as the right character, and the cobbler's son tries to rob a shop and kills the shopkeeper. That's a chain of consequence that ends in a death, and it started because a man in a wig didn't come to work. Roger's line in that episode is the thesis: people depend on my personas. It might not seem like it, but this town would fall apart without me. And he's right, and nobody knows. And one more thing, and this is from Franny 911. Roger isn't unpleasant purely by choice. E-thing, and this is from Franny 911. Roger isn't unpleasant by choice. His species has to let all their unpleasantness out. If they hold it in, it turns to poison and kills them. So the cruelty is medical. He's not being horrible for fun. He's venting constantly, because the alternative is death by suppression. Which mean, and naked to the limit one more time, establishes something that reframes all of it. He can call his people to send a ship. Time establishes something that reframes all of it. He can call his ship. Anytime. He can go home whenever 60-odd years on Earth. Much of it in an attic, in a house where the man downstairs regularly threatens to kill him. And he stays, where the man downstairs regularly threatens to kill him. And he stays. So here's what I think Roger actually is. He's got more selves than anyone alive and no self at all. Every persona is a way of being loved without being known. You get all the warmth and none of the exposure. Because if they turn on you, they're turning on Scotch Bingington, and you can just take Scotch Bingington off. That's the trade. That's what the costume buys you. Safety at the cost of ever actually being there for any of it. And the reason he never calls that ship, I think, is the saddest bit of arithmetic in the show. A place where you're tolerated is still the only place you've ever been kept. He was told once that he was the decider, and it turned out he was a dummy in a seat. The Smiths never told him he was special. They just didn't get rid of him. For Roger, that's the best offer he's ever had. MacFarlane voices him in a Swiss accent, modelled on Paul Lynde, by the way. And in April 2014, Logo TV ran a March Madness-style bracket and crowned Roger the gayest cartoon character of all time, which he would have absolutely adored, and which is the only award in this entire section anyone actually won. The thing I remember about this episode isn't a line, it's a sound. It's Roger crying from behind a pair of sunglasses. Right so, it's his birthday. His 1601st, he claims, which is either a good joke or a continuity problem, and I've decided not to look into it. The family have planned something at the bowling alley, which is a perfectly nice thing to do for someone. And he doesn't want it. He begs them for something else. He wants to be roasted. Friars Club style, proper celebrity roast. Everyone gets up and takes the mick out of him. He asks for it. I need that on the record before we go any further. He asked, he begged, so they take him to Pricey's Steakhouse. And they do it. And they do it properly, because this family don't do anything by halves. Francine goes first at him and calls him the most disgusting, out-of-shape piece of anything she's ever met. And she knows Sammy Hagar, which is a fantastic construction, actually, because the insult isn't the insult. The insult is the addendum. Stan tells Hayley he secretly wishes she were Benjamin Button, aging in reverse, so her life would soon be over. Hayley tells Steve he will never get laid. There's nothing attractive about him. He has the sex appeal of the cancer ward in a paediatric hospital. Steve tells Francine she's not smart, that he doesn't tell, "Yo mama's so dumb" jokes. He tells "my mama's so dumb" jokes. They're good. That's the thing. They're all really quite good at this, which tells you a lot about that dinner table. And Roger sits through the whole thing wearing sunglasses, barely reacting. And then he takes the sunglasses off. And he's been crying the entire time, behind the glasses, while everyone was performing. And the room realizes it at the same moment we do. And he asks them why. Why would you do this? What did I ever do to make you say those incredibly hurtful things? And Francine says the true thing, which is also the worst thing. Roger, this is what you asked for. And he says, and this is the line, you stay away from me, Francine. All of you stay away from me. This has been the worst night of my entire life. He asked for it and it destroyed him. And the fact that he asked for it is exactly why it destroyed him. Because he'd seen roasts. He knew the shape of the thing. He knew it was a form of love. That's why he wanted one. That's the entire reason. Roasts are what you do for people you adore. He'd watched people be adored in that specific way, and he wanted to go. He just had no idea what it would actually feel like when it was aimed at him. He'd only ever seen it from outside, and then because this is American Dad and not a drama, he tries to murder them all. The kitchen explodes, gas leak, engineered, and the family only survive because Klaus calls them into the living room because the porn channel has inexplicably come in unscrambled, which is the deus ex machina. That is what saves 5 lives. Klaus wanted to tell everyone about the telly. Then the living room gets machine gunned. Then Roger convinces them they're all in danger and hurries them into the car. And the brakes have been cut, and they only survive because the car is well built. At which point, Stan turns to camera and starts advertising the safety features of the fictional Chevy Tumbler, which is a joke I refuse to explain. Roger admits it, straight out. He tried to kill them, and he will never stop until he succeeds. He attacks Stan, and Steve tranquilizes H. McGregor Trank gun. McGregor gun, which Steve then also advertises to the audience. McGregor. It's a Scottish surname meaning son of Gregor. Stan sends him to Bangkwang prison in Thailand, which is described as the most escape-proof place on earth. Roger kills 24 guards and builds a boat out of their corpses, and it comes to them as a news report. That's how they deliver it. The family are watching the telly, and there's a breaking news story from Asia about an inmate who killed 24 guards and constructed a vessel from their remains, and everyone slowly puts their drinks down. Then he rings them. Watching the news? Roger says he's watching a Hoosiers game at a bar TT. Just kidding. I'm at Indianapolis Airport on a layover, watching a Hoosiers game at a bar. Roger calls to say he's coming to kill the family. So the family flee the planet. So that's the escalation. They go to space. There's a whole thing where the CIA has been bought by the Chiapet Corporation and renamed the Central Human Intelligence Agency, and they're sending an agent's family up to a space station for a year to test growing Chia in orbit. And the Smiths take their place because there is nowhere on Earth left to go, and he follows them into space. And he gets them, all of them. Stan makes it to the escape pod and is fully prepared to abandon his entire family, and then goes back. Not for them, but because he wants fresh panties for the ride home. And by the time he returns, Roger's got there first. They wake up tied to the shuttle, and Roger tells them what the punishment is. They have to roast each other. He wants them to feel what he felt. That's the plan, and that's the revenge. Make them do it to each other and watch them break. And they start, tentatively. And then they enjoy it. They're laughing. They're having a lovely time. Stan gets called almost as bad a person as Rachel Ray, and he cracks up, and Roger cannot process this. He's completely bewildered. He shouts that it's just about the meanest thing anyone's ever said to anyone, and they're all sitting there giggling, and they explain it to him. They can laugh at themselves and at each other because they're close. It's what the whole thing is for. It always has been. The cruelty is the proof. And Roger tells them the thing he came all this way to not say. He doesn't feel like part of the family. He never has. After everything. After all those years he's been in that attic thinking he's a guest. And Stan Smith, who cannot be tender without immediately covering it with a threat, tells him bluntly that they love him, that he's a Smith, plain and simple, and that he can go do one if he can't accept that. That's the most emotionally direct sentence Stan has ever produced, and it still had to have an insult stapled to the end of it, because that's the only way it can get out of him. One detail I can't stop thinking about. Before the roast, Roger tells Klaus he can't participate, and the reason he gives is, "I hate you." He says it's not out of anger, it's simply a fact. It's 67 degrees outside, and I hate you. And then later, when he's got the entire family bound and electrified and forcing them to destroy each other for his amusement, he leaves Klaus alone. Doesn't tie him up, lets him sit and watch the roast with him, like mates, because Klaus didn't roast him. And that's the whole criterion. One creature in that house didn't say anything hurtful, so that creature gets a seat and a view. So here's the thing this episode knows that I don't think many things know. The loneliest place isn't outside a family. Outside is fine. Outside you know where you stand. The loneliest place is inside one, sat at the table, invited, included, part of the photograph, watching everyone else be comfortable in a way that you do not have the equipment for. Roger couldn't tell the difference between affection and cruelty. Not because he's thick, because nobody had ever been affectionate with him in a form he could recognise. He'd seen the shape from a distance and copied it and got it catastrophically wrong. And then he was the only one in the room who didn't get the joke at his own party that he'd asked for. I said earlier that being kept isn't the same as being wanted, and that he'd take kept. This is the episode where he finds out he was wrong about that, and the finding out nearly kills 5 people. There's a bin bag at the back of Roger's wardrobe with a costume in it. That's how this one starts. A pack of caterpillars have got into the attic and chewed holes in most of his disguises, which is an emergency of the highest order for him. So he's rummaging around at the back for something wearable, and he finds an outfit he doesn't recognise. He puts it on. He's delighted with it. He can't place whose it is, but he looks at himself and says, "Damn, I look good in this," which is the last happy moment he has for 20 minutes. And he walks into town, and everyone stares at him with pure, undiluted hatred. Not annoyance, not, "Oh God, it's him." Hatred. He walks past people, and they stop what they're doing. He gets to a motel, and Principal Lewis physically assaults him. And that's when he's reminded who he is. He's Ricky Spanish, and Ricky Spanish is the most hated man in Langley Falls. Now the show does this thing, and it's one of the best running bits it ever built, where any time the name is spoken, it cuts instantly to a still image of Ricky doing something appalling. There's a whisper on the soundtrack, Ricky Spanish, and there he is, attacking the elderly. Ricky Spanish, burning down a petting zoo. Ricky Spanish, taking sweets off a child. It's an entire biography delivered in flashcards. Roger's own assessment, which he gives to Steve on the way home, is that Ricky was the worst persona he ever created, and that he's earned the hatred of every single person in that town in one way or another. Everyone. Not a sample. All of them. And Steve, who we'll get to properly later, but who is the moral engine of this entire programme, has a caterpillar in a jar. And he uses it. He does the metaphor. Look, the caterpillar's going to change into something beautiful. And so can Ricky. And I'll help you. And Roger, who has just been beaten up in a motel car park, agrees. So they make a list. First stop is Brian Lewis's houseboat. And Brian recalls what Ricky did to him, which is that Ricky knocked him unconscious and left him in Tijuana with no money and no ID. And Brian forgives him. Immediately. No hesitation. And then adds that it's because he's on way too many antipsychotics. Next is Bullock's house. And Ricky has to remind Bullock what he did, because Bullock's off his face on cocaine and doesn't immediately recall it. What he did was kill Bullock's wife. He killed the man's wife, and the man needs a prompt, and then the man forgives him. And I want to stop here because this is the joke that's actually the point. The forgiveness is worthless. Both of them forgive him instantly, and neither of them is in any condition to be doing so. One's medicated into oblivion, one's high. Ricky is collecting absolutions from people who cannot meaningfully give them. He's got 2 ticks on the list, and he has repaired precisely nothing. Because forgiveness that costs the forgiver, nothing repairs nothing. He's not making amends. He's farming signatures. Then there's Daniel, former partner in crime. And what Ricky did to Daniel was let him take the fall for a sweater heist. Daniel went to prison, Ricky didn't, so they get Daniel out. Roger springs him by turning up as the judge's wife. And when Steve asks how on earth he's had the time to be a judge's wife for years, Roger saw Daniel wants to kill Ricky for what he did to him .ie time, which is a perfect answer and a complete non-answer, and I think about it a lot. Daniel wants to kill Ricky on sight. Steve physically stops him. Steve stands between the man Ricky ruined and Ricky and says, he's changed. And then they go for a burger. And at the burger place, Roger quietly leans over to Daniel and tells him the actual plan. There's another heist, and this time, Steve takes the fall. So they borrow Brian Lewis's houseboat, and they borrow Guns Off Bullock, the 2 men who forgave him, whose forgiveness he has now converted directly into equipment, and they go to the docks. Steve works it out mid-job, and Daniel knocks him out with a gun. He comes round and tries to stop them, and the guards get alerted, and there's a chase across stacked shipping containers, and Steve slips. He's going over the edge, and Roger catches him. He catches him by the arm. He's got him, and then he takes Steve's wallet out of his pocket, and he lets go. Steve Fallen, the butterfly, the caterpillar in the jar, the metaphor, the whole basis of Steve's argument, never emerges. Illy bail him out. And the butterfly, the caterpillar in the jar, the metaphor, the whole basis of Steve's argument, emerges. Beautiful. Fully formed, exactly as promised. And then it dies in the jar. And then Werner Herzog narrates the last few minutes of the episode. I want to be clear that I'm not doing a bit. The actual Werner Herzog turns up and narrates the ending in that voice, comparing Steve to the butterfly, with split screens, and a title card appears that says, a Werner Herzog film. The AV Club's Kevin MacFarlane called it a wild leap and completely ridiculous, and also really funny, which is about right. He gave the episode a B and called it a light, breezy romp, which, I mean, sure, it is that. It's also an episode where a child goes to prison because he believed in someone. So, what is this actually about? I think it's a redemption arc that flatly refuses to redeem, and I think that's braver than the alternative. Because Ricky Spanish isn't a persona Roger has. It's a permission slip. That's the distinction. Roger doesn't become someone else in that costume. He becomes himself without the small amount of restraint he normally applies. And the costume is the paperwork that makes it allowable. He's not possessed, he's authorized. And we know that for certain because of what happens later. In Persona Assistant, Stan puts on the Ricky Spanish outfit. And Stan, a completely different person, a man with a wife and children and a job, becomes a tyrant, holding the entire town hostage. It takes Roger, dressed as Jeannie Gold plus Rogue, to stop him. And the episode reveals, along the way, that Ricky and Jeannie are siblings, which is the sort of lore this show generates casually while doing something else. The costume does it to whoever's in it. That's the horror. It's not Roger's fault in the sense of it being unique to him. It's just that he made the thing. And Steve wasn't wrong, incidentally. That's what I keep coming back to. Steve's position that people can change, that a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, is correct. The butterfly did emerge. It did exactly what he said it would. It just did it in a jar, on a boat at sea, with nobody letting it out. Steve was right about transformation and wrong about who gets to decide when it happens. You cannot change someone by believing in them hard enough at them. You can only be standing nearby when they decide to. And if they don't decide to, your belief becomes the tool they use. He gave Roger a reason, and Roger used the reason as a lever. Klaus Hiesler was an East German Olympic ski jumper. I'm going to tell this one flat because it doesn't need any help from me. He was a ski jumper. He was, by the show's account, the pride of East Germany. And at the 1986 Winter Olympics, the CIA decided he might win gold, and they didn't want that. Cold War and all that. So they took him, and they swapped his brain waves with a goldfish's. And then his human body, now running on a goldfish's brain, got up and walked off. It went instinctively towards a nearby stream, because that's what a goldfish would do. And the CIA found it, and they froze it, and they let it decay. And Klaus, the man, was put in the bowl. And then he was assigned to live with the Smith family. The CIA ordered Stan to have him pose as their pet. That isn't a backstory. It's a war crime with a punchline attached. And I want to sit on one part of it in particular, because I think it's the part that gets lost. Stan's employer did that to him, and Stan's family have benefited from it every single day since. There's a man in a bowl on their kitchen counter, and the reason he's in the bowl is the job that pays for the counter. Nobody in that house has ever really reckoned with it. It's not that they're cruel about it, exactly. It's that they've collectively agreed it's funny. The show's own running gag is that whenever Klaus does something dark, the explanation is that he's German. In Deacon Stan Jesus Man, he tricks Roger into eating Francine's potato salad. And when Roger asks why, Klaus just laughs and says, "I'm German, it's what we do." And that's the arrangement. He's allowed to be bitter as long as the bitterness is a bit. Now. The flippity flop. His body is found. An expedition finds it. It's been out there this whole time, frozen, and it turns up, and Klaus finds out about it on the news, and he tells them about the jump. There was a move he'd invented, a spectacular thing he'd never got to perform, and he'd named it Dar Flippity Flop, which is what the title means. It's the name of a trick a man never got to do. He begs Stan to take him to the CIA to recover the body, and Stan says no. Stan, at that exact point in the episode, is bragging about how well he keeps his own body in shape. That's the scene it's cut against, deliberately. Klaus is finding out his body exists and Stan is admiring his own, and then Klaus tries to kill himself. Repeatedly. And fails, because he's a goldfish, and he can't. He can't even do that. The one act of agency available to a creature at the absolute end of its rope, and his body won't permit it, because his body is 4 inches long. Francine eventually shames Stan into helping. They get to the lab, and the technicians have been using the ice from around Klaus's body to chill their drinks. They've been using his corpse's ice for parties. The body is partially defrosted and rotted through. Decades of waiting, and it's ruined. And it's ruined because some blokes at work wanted their beers cold. So Klaus knocks Stan out with a blender and takes his own body. And good. And the show agrees with me, sort of. Because when the family find out, they think it's funny. They let it happen. Their explicit reasoning is that Stan had it coming. And Klaus abuses that body thoroughly. Smoking, drugs, sleeping with diseased prostitutes, playing with dead animals. He gets it tattooed. And Stan, in the fishbowl now, is screaming about it. And nobody believes him until he proves his identity. Klaus tells him privately he's never getting it back. And then Klaus goes to do his jump. And Stan, this is the bit, Stan has no choice but to get into Klaus's old human body. The rotted one. So there's a chase down a ski hill, with Klaus in Stan's body, and Stan in a decomposing corpse, and the other skiers are just watching this happen. Stan forces Klaus into a tree and breaks the leg of his own body, which he's now damaging from the outside, and then Stan ends up on the jump. In the Klaus, in Stan's body, lands Dar Flippity Flop over the radio, coaches him, tells him to let the body take over, and Stan does it. He lands Dar Flippity Flop. In mid-air, in a corpse, a man does the trick that another man invented 40 years ago and never got to do, and Klaus is pleased. He's watching, and he's pleased, and for about 2 seconds, it's the most beautiful thing in the whole series. And then Stan lands, and the body shatters, destroyed, permanently. The only copy, they put everyone back where they belong. And Stan apologizes. He acknowledges Klaus has had a harsh life, and he says he'll help him become human again. And Klaus asks when, and Stan says out loud that it'll probably never happen, and that's the ending. That's how they leave him. The AV Club gave that one a B+ and called it a perfect example of how the show had settled into being above average nearly every week. Which fine, but there's an IMDb review I found while I was reading around that stuck with me more, from someone who was furious that Klaus does these terrible things and then everything just resets and he never gets his comeuppance. And I thought, mate, you have got that exactly backwards. That isn't Klaus escaping consequences. It's the show showing you that nothing till he gets some time in a stolen body and then he's back on the counter early and he can't be rewarded properly. He gets a fortnight in a stolen body and then he's back on the counter, which isn't impunity. It's a cage with a revolving door. Everyone else in that house chose their damage. That's the thing I keep landing on. Stan picked his certainty. Francine built her filing system on purpose. Roger reaches for the costume every morning and could stop any time he liked. They're all complicit in their own condition. Klaus chose nothing. A government took a decision in 1986, and he has been living inside that decision ever since. He's the only one whose whole life is something that was done to him. Everyone else has agency in their own damage. Stan chose his certainty. Francine chose her filing. Roger picks up the costume every morning. Klaus chose nothing. A government took a decision in 1986, and he has been living inside that decision ever since. And the actual cruelty, the thing the show is quietly doing, is that everyone around him has agreed to find it amusing. He's not an animal that talks. That's the mistake people make, comparing him to other cartoon pets. And it's an easy one to make. He's a man that everyone has decided to treat as furniture, and the decision is unanimous, and it has never once been revisited. The reason he's spiteful, one thing he can do is make the potato salad thing happen. Eve. He can't earn anything. He can't be taken seriously. All he can do is make the potato salad thing happen. That's his entire remaining power in the 200. We get a glimpse of an older human Klaus in a possible future. Frail, and it's one of the rare moments the show admits that time is passing for his soul, even though his body stays exactly the same size. Are moments the show admits that time is passing for his soul, even though his body stays exactly the same size. He's aging in there. Stan says he's 58 in one episode. A couple of fun details to take the edge off because I've made that quite heavy. The 1986 Winter Games banner in the flashback is an error. There were no Winter Olympics in 1986. They didn't split from the Summer Games until 1994. So the founding trauma of this character happened at a sporting event that didn't exist. And his surname comes from a writer on the show, Keith Heisler. Although the show can't decide how to spell it, the subtitles in a couple of episodes say Heisler with 2 SS, and a book he shows Francine in another episode says Heisler with 1. They've been putting this man through it all this time, and they haven't settled on his name. There's one more, and I'll leave it here because it's the detail that finished me. In Bar Mitzvah Hustle, there's a moment where Stan walks off the set, and you can see Klaus in his dish, sitting in front of a green screen, and he's enormous. The dish is enormous, which implies that Klaus in reality is the size of a room, and is being shrunk down and inserted into every scene of this program separately. The DVD commentary mentions that the scene was at one point written so that D. Bradley Baker would climb out of a fish costume. He's not even in the room with them. Of course he isn't. Nobody is. This one starts with a bloke standing in the rain at a music festival. In 2008, Mike Barker went to Bonnaroo, and he watched My Morning Jacket play a 4-hour set in the rain. And something clicked. He said that from that point on, He realised music should be playing a bigger role in his writing, that writing was hard for him. And when you hear music that inspires good ideas, you're really grateful. And the band he ended up crediting most was Wax Fang. He said there's something inherently cinematic about their music, that Scott Carney's voice is stunningly clear and dramatic. And this is the bit I love, that his lyrics are specific enough to build stories around while staying flexible enough for different interpretations. That's a man describing his own writing process by describing someone else's songs. And he listened to a Wax Fang track called Majestic and got the major plot elements of an entire episode out of it. That episode is Lost in Space, and it's the one. If I had to hand someone a single episode of this show and say this is what it can do, it's this one, and it isn't close. Right, the setup. A while earlier, in Naked to the Limit One More Time, Jeff had found out Roger's an alien and couldn't keep it quiet. So Roger, solving the problem in the most Roger way conceivable, hurled him onto a passing spaceship. A ship belonging to his own species that had come to collect Roger and take him home. Roger stayed. He threw Jeff on and stayed. And Jeff was gone. For episodes. Actually gone. The show kept referencing it. Hayley holding out hope, Stan and Roger trying to rush her through the grieving process so she'd agree to be their tennis official, which is a horrible and perfect joke. Then this episode turns up and we find out where he went. Fox promoted it as the 150th episode. It was the 151st. They also promoted it as the reveal of Roger's home planet, which it isn't, it's a ship. Barker has said he never wanted to show the birth planet, so the marketing got both facts wrong, which Roger and Hayley get cameos, and the rest of the Smith family only show up together in a brief recap. Ow and Numbers is entirely on brand. Almost no Smiths in it. Roger and Hayley get cameos and that's your lot. 22 minutes of Jeff Fisher, a character most people had spent years regarding as furniture with a bong. He wakes up hanging from a ceiling in solitary confinement. An alien called Foster wakes him up and explains that he's the head of Emperor Zing's security. And then he's given the tour, and the ship is a shopping mall. And that's the design. It's an enormous, bizarre, mall-like facility. Roger's species are the slave owners. Half the ship is them. The rest are miscellaneous species, abducted off their own planets, and they're the labour. Every store and restaurant has been taken from a different world. Jeff gets put on a shawarma stand, and working the shawarma stand is Sinbad. The comedian Sinbad, playing himself, abducted 2 months ago. And Jeff's first assumption, which he says out loud, is that this is where Sinbad went when his career dried up at the end of the 90s. And Sinbad has to explain, wearily, that no, he's only been here a couple of months, he was doing fine. And Sinbad shows him around and takes him to a bar and explains the rules. There's one way off this ship. One. You have to prove that you're truly in love with someone. And Jeff, obviously, immediately says he'll do it. Because he's Jeff, and he loves Hayley, and it's the easiest test he's ever heard of. And Sinbad tells him the price of failure. If you fail, they remove your penis and keep it in a fishbowl. The aliens call it the smoothening, because you end up like a doll, nothing there. Sinbad has had it done. Everyone who's tried has failed. That's the reported history, every single one of them. Jeff does it anyway. So, the test. A creature called the Majestic is summoned. It's enormous and it goes into your mind, and it projects your memories onto banks of screens for the whole ship to watch and judge. And this is where the Wax Fang track comes in, and the sequences, look, I don't do this often, but it's beautiful. It's properly, actually beautiful. There's an IMDb review I read that said it's worth watching the episode for the song alone, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. The AV Club noted the show has esoteric, music-driven standards generally, but that this didn't lean on any familiar building blocks of the series at all. And what the Majestic shows is every time Jeff was a selfish, childish jerk to his wife. Every single one. It plays nothing else. Him being thoughtless, him being useless, him being a bad husband over and over on 100 screens in front of an entire civilization. And Emperor Xing declares that he's failed. And Jeff protests. He says he really does love her. He says it properly. And Xing ignores him and books him in for the smoothing in the morning. Now here's the bit that made me sit up. That night, Jeff, who is losing his genitals at dawn, who has nothing left to lose, who has been told his marriage is a fiction, gets offered a last night with someone. And he says no, because he won't cheat on Hayley. He's failed the test that proves he loves her, officially, on the record, in front of everyone. And he still won't do it. He's the only person in this entire show who behaves exactly the same, whether or not anyone's watching, and he does it on the worst night of his life, when it cannot possibly help him. And that's the character, and it's why this episode works. It didn't make Jeff better, it just showed us what he'd always been, and let us feel stupid for not noticing, so he goes back down into the pit and confronts the Majestic, and says, "You only showed the bad ones." And the Majestic says, "Yes, those were my instructions. Xing ordered it, only the negative memories, the whole apparatus, right there." So they plan a revolt, and the next morning, as Foster's coming at Jeff with a buzzsaw, there's a shapeshifter reveal, and Jeff appears on top of the Majestic, and he gets it to play the good memories, all of them, the real ones. And then the Majestic grabs Xing and plays his. The ship riots. Jeff and Sinbad run for an escape pod, and Sinbad fights off the guard. Jeff escapes with Sinbad. He gets slashed through the chest, and Jeff is begging him to come, and Sinbad dies there. Jeff escapes alone. And then the last beat. He's out, he's free, he's going home, and he finds out there are over 47,000 planets called Earth. He has no idea which one is his. Post-credits. Sinbad comes back as a Jedi-style ghost to keep him company on the way. So, the Majestic. I think the Majestic is the most accurate thing this show has ever built. And I think about it constantly. And here's why. It didn't lie. Not once. Every frame it showed was real. Jeff was a jerk to Hayley on every one of those occasions. There's no fabrication in it. It's a documentary. And it's completely, utterly false. Because a highlight reel of only your worst moments, played in order, at volume, is a lie assembled entirely out of true things. Nothing in it is invented, and the conclusion it produces is wrong. Which is the trick. That's the whole trick. And the reason it lands is that everyone's got one. Everyone has a Majestic. Most of us don't need an alien to operate it. It comes on by itself, usually around 3 in the morning, and it plays the same reel. And every clip is verified footage, and by the end, the Majestic beat him by pointing out the edit, elf, that isn't true, and that felt like evidence the whole way through. Jeff beat his by pointing out the edit, not by arguing the facts. He never once said, "That didn't happen." He said, "You're only showing some of them, and I know who chose." And that's the move, really. It's the only one there's ever been. Here's a question I couldn't let go of after that last one. And it's a stupid question, that turn it's not a factory ship or a warship. It's a giant slave ship. Slave ship a shopping mall? Because it is, look at it. It's not a prison ship, or a factory ship, or a warship. It's a mall. An enormous, gleaming retail complex flying through space, with a shawarma stand and a bar called Embarcaderos. And Sinbad explains it, almost as an aside, and it's the sort of detail you could easily miss, is the answer. The Majestic explains it, almost as an aside, and it's the sort of detail you could easily miss. Emperor Xing did not used to be a bad guy. That's the phrasing they use. He wasn't always this. And then he got his heart broken, and the first thing he tried to cope with it was compulsive shopping, which is why the ship is a mall. The entire architecture of that vessel, the thing thousands of enslaved beings live inside, the thing that abducts species and strips their planets of restaurants, is a coping mechanism that got out of hand. He was sad, so he bought things, and he kept buying things. And he was an emperor, so when he bought things, he bought them at scale, and eventually the retail therapy became a civilization. And when the shopping didn't work, because it doesn't, obviously, it never does, He escalated. He declared war on love itself. Now this is the part I find properly clever, and it's why I wanted to give Zing his own section rather than folding him into Jeff's story, because Zing didn't ban love. That's what a lesser villain does, and what a lesser writer does. He built an apparatus that disproves it, and then he invited people to test it. Think about the elegance of that. He didn't say, love is forbidden. He said, love is real, of course it is, and if you can demonstrate yours, you may leave. Here's the machine. It's fair. It's open to everyone. Go on, and the machine is rigged, and everyone fails. And they don't fail because Zing decreed it. They fail because they watched their own real memories and were forced to agree. So nobody blames Zing. Why would they? They've each personally concluded, from primary evidence, that their love wasn't good enough. It's not oppression, it's a finding. Each of them arrived at it individually, in front of a crowd, using footage of their own life. He didn't have to convince anyone of anything. He just controlled the edit and let them convince themselves. That's the most sophisticated thing this cartoon has ever done, and it's in an episode with a joke about a fishbowl full of genitals. He's voiced by Michael McKean, incidentally, who's very good at exactly this. The reasonable-sounding man with a wound where his reasoning should be, and the heartbreak. The founding heartbreak. The one that built the mall and rigged the machine and enslaved a ship full of species. It was Roger. Years ago, Zing and Roger were together, and Roger cheated on him, and not discreetly either. He blatantly made out with a human male right in front of him. That's the injury. One bad night for one alien. So follow that thread all the way through, because it's staggering when you lay it flat. An entire slave economy. A mall the size of a city. A species-wide belief that romantic love is an impossibility. Thousands of beings mutilated for failing a rigged test. All of it traces back to Roger being unfaithful at a party. And it means something else too, which I didn't clock the first time. Roger throwing Jeff onto that ship wasn't random. Roger knew whose ship it was. He didn't just get rid of an inconvenient man, he posted him first class to the person he'd broken. He took a bloke who was in love with his wife, and he sent him directly to the one being in the universe who had built an entire regime out of proving that love doesn't exist. Whether Roger thought that through is a question the show declines to answer, and I think that's the right call. Roger doesn't plan. He also never quite doesn't plan. That ambiguity is the character. And then the ending, when the Majestic finally turns the screens on Zing and plays his memories for everyone. His people riot. But look at what they riot about. They don't riot because he enslaved them. That was fine. That was policy. That had been the arrangement for years. Nobody was overturning that. They riot because he lied about love, which is what does it. The enslavement was tolerable. The lie about whether love exists was not. And I don't fully know what to do with that, but I think there's something true in it, that people will accept an enormous amount of material injustice, and will absolutely not forgive being made to believe that the good thing isn't real. He's last seen being pelted with objects by his own subjects, and that's it. Nobody knows what happened to him. The show never went back. Zing is what unprocessed pain does when you give it resources. That's the whole of him. He didn't get over it, and he didn't get help, and he didn't sit with it. He institutionalized it. He took a private conclusion. Love is a con. It will be taken from you. Better to know now. And he built infrastructure around it until his personal conclusion became everyone's default setting. He scaled it. He made it the weather. And the thing that gives him away completely is that he needed everyone else to fail too. And that's the giveaway. If Zing had actually made peace with what Roger did, he wouldn't need a machine. He wouldn't need the whole ship agreeing with him. He wouldn't need to watch strangers get their hearts broken on 100 screens every week and go, see, there it is again, told you. A person who has actually settled something doesn't need continuous confirmation from an audience. Zing needed a stadium. He built one. Because the moment one person passed that test, one, ever, a single one, the story he'd been telling himself for years would collapse. And then he'd just be a bloke who got cheated on and never recovered, sitting in a mall he bought to feel better, which is what he was the whole time. We've talked about certainty already, and I'm not going to run that lap again, but this is a different animal, and I want to be precise about the difference. Stan's certainty is defensive. It protects one man. It costs his family. It's a wall. Zing's is expansionist. He wasn't protecting a belief. He was exporting one. The second kind is the one that scales. The second kind is how you end up with a mall. I want to do these two together, and I want to say up front that I'm not going to resolve them into a single point. Because I don't think they resolve. They sit next to each other. That's sort of the whole thing. Let's start with Steve, and there have been many versions of Steve.T. I think is quietly one of the most revealing facts about this show. There have been 3 versions of Steve. The first one is in the unaired pilot presentation, which most people have never seen. And it's worth saying what that is. The episode called Pilot is not actually the pilot. The real pilot is a 6-minute thing, essentially the first 6 minutes of the series premiere, which MacFarlane, Barker and Weitzman made to sell the show to Fox. It never aired. It's drawn rougher, in a more cursory style, with weaker colouring. And in that version, Steve looks completely different. Different design, different outfit, and he's voiced by Ricky Blitt, not Scott Grimes. And his personality's different too. Then Scott Grimes comes in for the series proper, and they redesign Steve. Taller, more filled out, less geeky, and then, after the early seasons, they did it again. And here's the note. They made him softer, more emotional, cuter, more endearing, specifically to create a sharper contrast against his father's ruggedness and machismo. Sit with that for a second, because it's an unusual instruction to give an art department. They didn't redesign him to be funnier, they redesigned him to be more hurtable. They looked at this kid and thought, he needs to be someone you wince for. And that's what he became. Steve Smith is the moral engine of this entire programme. And I don't think that's a controversial reading. He's the one who believes people can change. We've seen where that gets him, with the caterpillar and the jar and the shipping containers, and I'll not go over it again. He's the one who bonds with the Krampus, because he works out that the Krampus punishes children out of love. Everyone else in that story is trying to kill something. Steve sat down having a chat with it, and he's wrong constantly. He's not wise. He's not secretly the clever one. He is demonstrably, over and over, wrong about people. And it costs him prison in one case, actual prison, and he does it again the following week. MacFarlane got an Emmy nomination in 2018 for his voice work on an episode called The Talented Mr. Dingleberry, which is a Steve episode. D. Bradley Baker got one the year before for Fight and Flight. 4 primetime Emmy nominations across the whole run, and the ones they got in the back half were for performance. Right, Haley was built as Gloria Stivic. That's the blueprint, stated outright by the people who did it. The liberal daughter to Stan's Archie Bunker, and in the early episodes, that's her entire function. She exists to argue with her father. That was the engine of the show. That was the pitch Seth made down the phone to Mike Barker, and Weitzman said later that it had a limited shelf life, that it didn't provide them nearly as much as they'd originally thought it would, that there are still times when they have that dynamic, but nothing like season 1. And this is the bit that the show actually grew and benefited from dropping it, because it would have got boring after a while. So think about what that means for Haley specifically. Her arc, at a structural level, is the show gradually admitting that a person is not a position. She was a viewpoint with a haircut. She was there to say the other thing. And the show got bored of that within about 2 seasons, and when it stopped needing her to be an argument, she was finally allowed to be a person. Which is a slightly unglamorous way to become a character. You become one by outliving your usefulness as a debate, but it's what happened. And I think it's why she's the most stable adult in that house by the end. And her actual story, the one that matters, is Jeff. Because after Naked to the Limit, one more Roger and Stan try to hurry Hayley through her grief, so she'll referee their badminton match. He waits. Nothing else to it. Roger and Stan try to hurry her through her grief, so she'll referee their tennis. She holds out hope in Spelling Bee My Baby, while everyone around her has moved on. And then the longest distance relationship. She gets him on a CB radio. They actually make contact across space, and he finds a wormhole and comes back through it, and arrives 60 years late. She's elderly. He's cost her a whole life. There was a man, Matt Davis, a millionaire, and she could have had a good life with him, and she didn't because she waited. And the shock of seeing Jeff gives the elderly Hayley a heart attack. So Jeff goes back through the wormhole and finds young Hayley and tells her to move on with her life. He gives her up. That is what he does with the thing he crossed the universe for. He hands it back, and he doesn't know, the audience knows he doesn't, that Roger kills Matt Davis very shortly afterwards. The good life she was released to go and have gets murdered by the alien in the attic, off screen as a gag. Then holy shit, Jeff's back. And it's not Jeff, it's an alien called Zeblia wearing him. The real Jeff has been dissected. They transplant Jeff's brain into Zeblia's body so he can live. And then they wipe Stan and Hayley's memories, so neither of them knows that Jeff is, it only comes up again at the beginning of Roger's baby, when Roger mentions casually that Jeff can't get her pregnant because he's got an alien body. Bahama Mama, when Roger mentions casually that Jeff can't get her pregnant because he's got an alien body, which leads to Roger's baby, where Roger literally rebirths Jeff as a human being so they can have a life. Roger threw him off the planet. Roger's ex-boyfriend tortured him. Roger killed the man she could have been happy with, and Roger gave birth to him. Every single thing that has ever happened to Hayley Smith's marriage was done by the alien in the loft. So, Steve and Hayley, the reason I wanted them next to each other is armour. Everyone in that house has some. We've been through it. Stan's got the certainty, Francine's got the filing system, Roger's got 400 costumes, Klaus has got spite. Zing built a mall. Every single one of them found a way to make sure that the thing that hurt them can't get in again. The kids have got nothing. And there's the difference. Steve and Hayley never worked out the trick. Steve just keeps believing in people and getting done over. Hayley just keeps waiting for someone the entire show has spent its whole run telling her is worthless. Neither of them has developed a single defense mechanism worth the name, and they are, without question, the two happiest people in that building. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not going to tell you that sincerity wins. It doesn't. It demonstrably doesn't. Steve went to prison, Hayley lost 60 years and a millionaire. But here's what I notice. Stan's armour cost him his marriage for 7 years and an eye and a hand. Francine's cost her an entire self, which is now a garden. Roger's cost him the ability to be in the room. Klaus's has got him precisely nowhere, because his was issued to him. The armour didn't work either, which is the bit nobody says. It didn't work for a single one of them. They all got hurt anyway, and they got hurt, and they lost the thing the armour was made out of. Steve and Hayley just get hurt. They pay once, and that's the bill. And the show, slowly, has stopped treating that as the punchline. They redesigned a boy to be softer on purpose. They quietly retired a girl's entire political function so she could be a human being. Nobody announced either decision. It just happened over years in the background while everyone was busy watching the alien. Before we get to the last one, I want to do a bit of a rummage. There are things about this show that don't fit anywhere, and that I'd feel bad not mentioning, so this bit's a draw. Nothing here connects to anything else. That's fine. Santa Claus is a recurring villain in American Dad, and I don't think that's widely known outside the fandom. It starts in For Whom the Sleigh Bell Tolls, where Steve nearly kills him. And Santa, understandably, takes this personally and vows revenge on the Smiths. And then he just keeps coming back. Year after year, It becomes an actual ongoing arc across more than a decade of Christmas specials. In 90 North 0 West, he kidnaps Steve and takes him to the North Pasanta needs gemstones taken from the giant's eyes, unleashing an ancient Sumerian giant that's entombed up there. The giant needs gemstones taken from its eyes. It goes about as well as you'd expect. The giant wakes up and starts sucking in. Santa appears to die by falling and breaking his neck. TV decapitates it with a Christmas train. Santa appears to die by Faye, then he's back into the Jingleverse, giving Stan a pair of VR goggles so he can trap the Smith family in the Jingleverse forever. He's back into the Jingleverse, giving Stan a pair of VR goggles so he can be king of presents forever. And then in Nasty Christmas, where he's trying to get back with Mrs. Claus, and he's not even the villain anymore. And Stan and Klaus openly express disbelief that he escaped the Jingleverse at all. All those Christmas specials, and Father Christmas ends up with a redemption arc. Not a thing I expected to be saying tonight. Then there's Tearjerker. Tearjerker is a full James Bond parody, outside the main continuity, where Roger plays a Bond villain and the whole cast gets slotted into spy film roles. It works far better than it has any right to. There's a Season 9 sequel called For Black Eyes Only, and it's fine, but it's not the first one. And Hot Water, which I have to mention because it's one of the strangest half hours of television ever broadcast on a major American network. It got an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Animated Program in 2012. It is, essentially, a musical about a hot tub. CeeLo Green voices the hot tub. The hot tub is evil, and the episode ends by cutting to black on Stan's death. And that's the ending. They kill the lead character and cut to black in a musical about a hot tub, in a show that had been running for 7 years, on a Sunday night before the Watershed equivalent. It was also written as a potential series finale, which, we'll come back to that. The awards briefly, because they're a bit sad and a bit funny. 4 Primetime Emmy nominations across the entire run. 2 Annie nominations, a GLAAD nomination for Lincoln Lover, a Prism Award win in 2007 for Mental Health, which is a lovely thing to have won. Several Golden Reel nominations for sound editing, multiple Teen Choice nominations, which they never won, and multiple People's Choice nominations, which they also never won. And then, in June 2013, the American Society of Composers, Authors and Publishers gave it Top Television Series. And that's the big one, really. The show's most prestigious award is for its music, which, given the orchestra, and given that an entire episode was built out of a Wax Fang song after a man stood in the rain at Bonnaroo, feels correct in a way I can't fully articulate. Since we're rummaging, I should say something about the farce because it's the show's actual house style, and I've not named it once tonight. The way American Dad works structurally is that it starts somewhere completely reasonable and then refuses to stop. That's the engine. It doesn't do the Family Guy thing of cutting away to a joke. It stays put and lets the situation get worse in a straight line. Take Home Wrecker. Stan and Francine disagree about remodeling the house. That's the premise. A normal couple, a normal argument about decor. So they divide the house in half and each decorate their own side. And that's not enough. So they each start trying to drive the other out. And that's not enough either. So eventually, they build a colossal block wall straight through the middle of their home, and the rest of the family have to spend one holiday after another alternating between Fran's place and Stan's place, because the two halves of the same house are now treated as separate residences. Nobody ever went mad. Nobody had a psych or Stan's food restaurant. Roger offers to help Stan open a restaurant. And they ended up with a wall, or Stan's food restaurant. Stan asks Roger to help him open a restaurant. Roger takes over. Roger kicks Stan off the project entirely. So Stan opens a rival restaurant next door, and Stan's is a smash hit. So Roger blows Stan's restaurant up and destroys his own in the process. And Stan threatens to kill him, and then backs down, because Roger pulls a gun on him and tells him to relax, which is the whole show in one plot. 2 men, 1 restaurant, both restaurants gone, a firearm, and then everyone goes home. The surrealism is the other half of it. The bear in Hurricane, who stops mid-attack, lowers his eyelids halfway, and slowly shakes his head at Stan for missing him with a harpoon and spearing Francine into a wall instead. The bear is disappointed, that's the joke. In Why Can't We Be Friends, the hallways of the Smith house transform into dark alleyways every single time Roger pays Jeff. And in A Little Mystery, Klaus and Haley are shown playing one-on-one basketball .t-genre when it needs to. And in The Missing Kink, Steve and Klaus are shown playing one-on-one basketball against each other. Score 11-10. Klaus is a goldfish. They do not explain it. They do not return to it. It is simply presented as a thing that is happening. Which brings me to Rogue briefly, because he's a main character now, and he got here in the most American Dad way imaginable. When Roger's Roger got stressed, grew a lump, someone took the lump off, and the lump is now a person with a name who first appeared in the 15th season and has a voice actor and merchandise. Our person with a name who joined the main cast in the 15th season and has a voice actor and merchandise. D. Bradley Baker does him, on top of Klaus, so one man is playing both the fish and the tumour. Then there's the Reginald Koala arc, which I can't leave out. During one of Haley's breakups with Jeff, she dated a black man in a koala's body, named Reginald, known for very urban mannerisms. That ran across a string of episodes as an actual ongoing storyline. And I want to stress that the koala was not the strangest thing happening in that season, and Barker's explanation of why they bother with continuity at all is worth hearing, because it's the most thoughtful thing anyone connected to this show has said about Craft. He said they try to obey the basic rules of continuity, and they avoid stories where a character takes a big step like marriage and then doesn't go back to it. And his reasoning was that by doing that, when they have big changes in future, the audience knows they're going to be living with those changes for a while. So it's not a thrown away bit. It endows the story beat with more power, because it's going to last. It's not just a reset button. It's why Jeff being gone actually meant something, and why Haley waiting landed. Because Barker had decided, years earlier, that when this Shenzhen Studios put out an American Dad pinball table in 2015 as part of its Balls of Glory pinball pack into the real world in some daft ways. There's a Zen Studios pinball table from 2015 for the 10th anniversary. There's a card game called Animation Throwdown, where Stan and Roger turn up alongside Futurama and King of the Hill and Archer. There's a mobile game, American Dad, Apocalypse Soon, which passed 10 million downloads. There's a soundtrack album, American Dad, Greatest Hits, released in October 2024 with 19 songs on it. And in July 2025, Stan Smith became a playable operator in Call of Duty. Black Ops 6. Stan Smith is in Call of Duty, as a bundle, in the shop. I don't have a joke for that. I just needed you to know it. One last thing for the draw. In Chimdale, it's revealed that Stan has been bald since college and wears a wig, which contradicts several earlier episodes. In Franny 911, Roger scalps him while role-playing as an American Indian. In Choosy Wives Choose Smith, his hair grows after months on a desert island. So either the wig is canon and those episodes aren't, or 400 episodes in, and they've already gone back to check whether the protagonist has hair. That they didn't. 400 episodes and nobody's ever gone back to check whether the protagonist has hair. Right. The last one. On the 16th of July, 2013, Fox cancelled American Dad. That's the headline. After 9 years, that was it. The network that built it, that made it the first series specifically for its animation domination block, that put it on after the Super Bowl, done. And within a bow, so it was dead for roughly a day. WIS 15 episodes. Ordered. The New York Daily News ran it on the 18th, so it was dead for roughly a weekend. But the transition was a mess, and this is where things start getting properly strange. Because in November 2013, Mike Barker left. 10 seasons, co-creator, executive producer, co-showrunner, the man who rang up about the right-wing dad and the liberal daughter, the man who stood in the rain at Bonnaroo. Gone right as early production, he stayed under an overall contract with 20th Century Fox Television. But reports only mention creative differences rather than any explicit falling out with the studio. Stayed under an overall contract, Steve Callahan replaced him. Levision, so it wasn't a falling out with the studio. He just stopped doing the show. Brian Boyle replaced him. Weitzman carried on as sole showrunner. And here's the other bit of chaos. Fox had 3 unaired episodes left. They aired them in September 2014, after the cancellation. 2 on the 14th, 1 on the 21st. And Fox implied these 3 episodes constituted a season of their own. And TBS said no, actually, those 3 are the start of our season, which will be resuming on our network. 2 networks, 3 episodes, 2 completely incompatible accounts of what season it was. Which brings me to something about this show and numbers, which I find very funny and which I've been meaning to mention. Nobody knows how many seasons American Dad has had. I'm not being glib. There are multiple conflicting reports and models. There are at least 2 competing systems, and they disagree about whether season 1 was 7 episodes or 23, because the show premiered in February and then vanished until May, and nobody could agree whether the gap was a hiatus or a season break. Fox's own website said one thing. Fox Flash, which is Fox's own publicity centre, said the opposite. So Fox contradicted Fox. Barker and Weitzman, in interviews, used a third arrangement that matched neither. Then TBS got hold of it, and in 2014, TBS followed Fox's PR model. Then in October 2015, TBS changed its counting method to one that almost followed the writing seasons, but made a complete hash of the broadcast order. Then by October 2016, they'd sorted the broadcast order and were mostly counting by writing seasons, except for 2 episodes they'd stuck in the wrong place. Then on the 1st of July 2017, TBS changed the counts again, this time to a calendar-based system. 3 changes, 1 network, and the Wikipedia editors, bless them, eventually noted in a discussion that they can't rewrite history and reorganize every time TBS changes its mind. Then Hulu got the streaming rights in July 2017 and merged episodes 1 to 23 into season 1 and episodes 173 to 190 into season 10. And Disney Plus did the same. So Ricky Spanish is season 8, episode 17. It's also season 7, episode 17. Both are correct, neither is correct. And there's another one. Lost in Space was promoted as the 150th episode. It was the 151st. The actual 150th was the full cognitive redaction of Avery Bullock by the coward Stan Smith, which deserved the party more anyway, on the strength of the title alone. And TBS promoted an episode called 300 as the 300th. It was the 300th produced. It aired as the 299th, because an episode called Yuletide Repeat was made before it and wasn't scheduled to go out first. They made an episode called 300 and aired it 299th. I find this so much funnier than I should. 400 odd episodes, and the show has never once been able to count itself. Right, back to the story, because there's an ending. 10 years at TBS, and over that decade, something quietly extraordinary happened. TBS stopped making scripted television, and American Dad just kept going. And going, until it was the last scripted original series left on the entire network. The last one. Everything else had gone, and there was still a CIA agent and an alien in a loft. On a Monday night, reruns of American Dad continue on TBS, Adult Swim, and True TV through 2030. so it's not vanishing, while new episodes air on Fox instead. Reruns continue on TBS, Adult Swim, and True TV through 2030, so it's not vanishing, but the new episodes stopped. And on the 2 seasons, the same day, reports surfaced that it might go back to Fox, and in April 2025, Fox picked it up. 4 seasons, as part of a mega deal with Disney TV Studios, alongside The Simpsons, Family Guy, and Bob's Burgers. It's now renewed through its 25th season, which takes it into the 2028-29 television season. Fox's television network president, Michael Thorne, explained the decision like this: "It's kind of simple. They got a chance to have another show with Seth, and they took it. He said Seth's a great partner, and it extends their reach to a very passionate animation audience." Fox Entertainment's CEO, Rob Wade, was blunter. He said it was opportunistic. Its run was over on TBS, so they were delighted to bring it back. Opportunistic. That's the word from the chief executive. Which, fair enough. It's a business. Weitzman's reaction is my favourite thing in this whole section. He said they'd been on Fox for 8 years, and TBS for 10, and when TBS wasn't going to make any more scripted shows, he assumed they'd end up at Hulu. And that didn't happen. And then Fox came back. His line was, "We won the jackpot." And then, I don't even know how often it's ever happened, that you go away for 10 years and then suddenly arrive back at home base. I think I giggled for about 3 days. He giggled for 3 days. It returned to Fox on the 22nd of February, 2026. Back in animation domination, the block it was literally the first show ever made for, back in 2005. 1 cancellation, 1 network that ran out of scripted television underneath it, and it walked back into the same building. And they made a joke about it in the premiere, which is a lovely bit of nerve. Francine's discussing reuniting with her estranged sister, and Haley says, "Are you sure this is a good idea, Mum? Getting back together after so many years could be a disaster." And a Fox logo appears in the corner of the screen, and Francine says, "Yeah." Brian Boyle explained that Weitzman wrote that one, and that Weitzman's been around since the pilot, so he remembers the sting of leaving Fox and the joy of going to TBS. And Boyle said the homecoming back to Fox was kind of redeeming. What actually changed? Language. Boyle put it plainly. It's not that different, but you do have more back and forth with the lawyers who want to make sure it's up to network standards. He said on TBS they used to reckon they could say 3 S words and an a-hole, and they can't do any of that now. So they've gone back to being polite. After 10 years of being able to swear, that's the price of the homecoming. 389 episodes at the time of writing. Weitzman's teased the 400th and said it'll be epic and that it stands for the 100th mission and that he'd let the audience work out the rest from there. There's a space anthology coming where all the characters play different parts. And one more thing, which I think is the single best fact I've got. 3 episodes of American Dad were written to be the series finale. Hot Water, Echoes, Guardian? 3 separate times, this show sat down, wrote its own ending, said goodbye, and then didn't need it. 3 times it prepared to die, and 3 times it woke up the next morning with more episodes to make. I don't know what to compare that to. It's like writing your own eulogy on 3 separate occasions, and then having to go back to work. So here's what I think, and I'll say it once and I'll not make a meal of it. I said right at the start that this show was made as a replacement for a cancelled programme by people who weren't sure what they were making and got written off by critics before it went out. That's where it started. And then it got cancelled itself. And then it outlived the network that saved it, outlived its entire scripted division, sat there as the last one standing while the lights went off around it. And then it went home. It didn't win by being the best. It was never the best. It's not even MacFarlane's most popular show. It's not close. It just didn't stop. It kept being there. Another one and another one and another one, for 21 years, while many others in the building either got cancelled or moved on. Which isn't a triumph, really. It's closer to attendance. though I suppose if you keep attending for long enough, nobody can tell the difference. So that's where I've got to with it. I think the reason American Dad works as background noise is exactly the same reason it's worth actually looking at, and I don't think those two things are in tension at all. It's comfortable because it's not built on anything that decays. Barker had it right all those years ago when he said their humour comes from the human condition and emotions everyone can relate to, and that it's therefore a bit more evergreen. He was right. I just don't think he knew how right. Because he was talking about jokes. He was making a fairly modest practical point about why their gags would still land in 2 years' time, given they work 18 months ahead, and a Harriet Mears reference can go off like milk. And what he'd actually described was a show that would still be running long after he'd left it, playing quietly in millions of dark rooms, because it turned out that ego and loneliness and the things people can't say out loud don't date. Political satire dates. A man who cannot open an envelope does not date. An alien who'd rather be 400 strangers than one person does not date. A bloke in a fishbowl who was somebody once does not date. They set out to complain about an administration and accidentally made something durable. And I don't think anybody involved has ever quite claimed credit for that. Possibly because nobody's sure who'd get it. There's loads I didn't get to. I've barely touched Bullock, who deserves his own thing entirely. I skated straight past most of the personas, and there are 400 of them with lives and prison sentences and children, and I've got a whole video in me about that one, if there's an appetite for it. Rogue barely got a mention. The golden turds ending in the 300th deserved more than a passing nod. Another time, maybe. There's no shortage. Anyway, if you're still awake, the house on Cherry Street is still there. There's a control room under the lawn nobody's used in years, and an underworld under the floor with the lights off, and a man in the attic putting a wig on, so a town he's never told will keep functioning tomorrow.